Hey guys, today we are going to set up QBittorrent and a VPN within two separate Docker containers on our Raspberry Pi. This is going to be a very in-depth tutorial, mainly to help other people out there who want to do the exact same thing I've literally just gone through. And also it's to help myself for future reference because I invariably am going to forget everything I have done, and this video will just help. So let's draw exactly what we're going to do. We have our Raspberry Pi, and this could be anything, right? It can even be your home PC. It doesn't really matter. But we have QBittorrent running in a Docker container, and we also have a VPN running in a separate container. Now, this is really important because eventually we might add to this. We might do like radar and sonar and a bunch of other extra services, but we don't want these directly going out to the internet. We want to route the traffic through our VPN and basically force it to use our VPN network interface. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this tutorial so that we can stay protected online. To set up QBittorrent, it's really easy within a Docker container. Essentially, we can just use this image here, Linux server / QBittorrent. There is a Docker compose thing here that we can copy. So what we're going to do is hop over to our Raspberry Pi. We're going to open up a directory and we're going to create a new folder called QBittorrent. That's essentially where we're going to keep our Docker compose file and our configuration files for the piece of software. Go into there and create a new file called docker compose-yaml. Essentially paste the contents in there. For volumes, I want to use the current working directory, so we're going to do /config. Essentially what that tells it is create the config folder within the current working directory. The other thing you want to change is the volume of your downloads folder. You want the downloads to map to wherever your external hard drive is, and for me that happens to map up to /media /deolding, etc. Now you will see I've commented out these ports. You can leave it as is for now, and I have also changed this port from 8080 to 8081. Essentially, that was a troubleshooting step. When I exposed port 8080 while using the VPN, it said that port was in use by some other service, so I had to go ahead and increment it by one, and then I could access the QBittorrent web client. Go ahead, save your changes, open up a terminal window, go to your folder directory, and you're going to run docker compose up -d. This will spin up your Docker container for you and keep it running permanently in the background. Once that's up and running, if you type in localhost port 8080 or 81, depending on which port you mapped it to, you'll get the user interface and you can see it's up and running. Now we're going to head over and do our VPN setup. For me, I am using the Torguard VPN. Now, with that, Torguard offers an application like a desktop app that you can use. However, they don't have a Docker container. So we have a couple of options. We can use what they call OpenVPN or Wireguard VPN. These are both open source kind of projects that you can use, and we can generate a set of config from Torguard to integrate nicely to this. For this purpose, I've chosen Wireguard. So we're going to go ahead and create a new folder in our root directory called Wireguard VPN. I'm going to go into that folder, and again, we're going to create a new Docker compose file. I'll put a link to this down in the description below, but if you do a search for Wireguard VPN Docker Hub, again, we want the Linux server / Docker Wireguard, and this is the one we want. If we scroll down, we can get the Docker compose file. Essentially, we're just going to copy and paste this into our file. I've gone ahead and left everything as default. The only thing you need to change is the volume, so obviously make sure that matches up to the working directory that you want to use for this, for your configuration files. Again, I could have done // instead I did the whole qualified name. For ports, you'll have just this one. You can add these ports in, it doesn't really matter. Hey guys, I'm currently editing the video you're watching. I just wanted to clarify that for the purposes of this tutorial, I made those port mapping changes manually in Portainer, which is what you're going to see shortly. However, it's always best practice to do this in your Docker compose file. We generally like to have our configuration managed as code instead of doing manual changes. Again, we're going to run docker compose up -D. This will start up our WireGuard VPN. If you're using Torguard like myself, you want to go ahead and log into your account. Head over to Tools, Config Generator. Select WireGuard VPN. Select a server you want. For me, I went Sydney. Leave everything as is and hit Generate Config. Once you do that, I found I had to click into this white box here before it would give me a config, but essentially, I'm not going to do it now because it does have private keys and stuff. But essentially, you want to copy whatever appears in this white box, head back over to your VPN config. So you'll have a config folder. So we're going to go into that config folder. We want to go into wg_confs. And essentially, we want to paste the entire contents over what is in here. So if you do a nano into that file, essentially you want to open it up and replace the entire contents with the output that Torguard gave you. That will allow your WireGuard configuration to use your Torguard private VPN. So we're going to head over to Portainer. Now, Portainer is a great way to manage your Docker images. You can do a lot of cool things with it. If you haven't set this up yet, I highly recommend doing a quick YouTube search. There are plenty of other great tutorials on how to set this up, and then come back to this video right now. Awesome. So now we have our VPN up and running, and we have a QBittorrent client. However, we want to route the traffic from QBittorrent into our VPN container. And this is how we go about doing it. Before I dive into it, I actually have to give a quick shout out to this content creator, Awesome Open Source. His tutorial was a huge help from this point on forward on how to route the traffic through the container. So full credit to this guy. I'm just going to try and summarize what he goes through, but if you want a more in-depth explanation, I highly recommend you check his video out. Essentially, we're going to go into our container, click on Edit. We're going to scroll down to the Network tab. Now, you may have seen a bunch of ports configured here. I want you to take note of those and delete them. Reason for that is we're going to actually expose those ports not on our local QBittorrent container, but rather the VPN container, and then route it through to use those ports. So once you've removed those ports, click on Deploy the Container. This will essentially redeploy it. We then want to go over to our WireGuard container. Again, we want to do the same thing. So go Edit. And then under the port section, we want to go publish a new network port. And essentially, you should have had 5182 already, but you want to add these other three in. So 6881 on UDP, 6881 on TCP, and port 8080 on TCP. Port 8080 is the default port that you use for the web UI interface. Like I said earlier in the video, I had quite a lot of trouble getting port 8080 to work. For some reason, when I started my WireGuard VPN up, it seemed to be using that port already. And essentially the web UI wasn't able to start, which is why I also exposed port 8081 and changed the config to use that port instead. I don't know if you guys will have the same trouble, but that's why my configuration is the way it is. So once you've gone ahead and done that, again, click Deploy the Container. This will redeploy. And now for the final step, we're going to go back to our torrent container. Again, click on Edit. This time we want to go down to Network. And what you can do in Portainer is you can actually change the network to point to a container. So we're going to select Container, and the container we're going to select is our WireGuard container, which contains the VPN. Once you do that, go Deploy the Container. Now essentially what we've done is we've configured it so our QBittorrent Docker container will always route its traffic through to WireGuard, which is pretty cool. Once both of those containers are up and running, the final step we have to do is to log into the web UI and bind it to that network interface. So we're going to go ahead and go localhost. For me, it was port 8081. If you kept it as 8080, use that instead. And we're just going to log in. Now, if you're struggling to log in, the default username is admin, and the default password you can get from your logs. So if you go into your QBittorrent container and click on logs, Because I've already changed my password and everything, there's no temporary password in my log file. However, when you first set this up, you will see an entry there with the temporary password that you can go ahead and use for the first time of logging in. So once we've logged in, we want to go to Tools, Options, Advanced. And what you want to do is for network interfaces, you want to bind it to WG0, which is essentially your WireGuard network interface. What this will do is force all of the traffic for QBittorrent to use that. And if for whatever reason that network interface gets connected, it will kill all of your traffic, so you don't have to worry about having your IP addresses exposed or anything like that. Now we're essentially done. I would recommend that you log into both your VPN and your QBittorrent container. Actually, I'll just show you guys how to do that. So click into your container and go console and just run this command on both of them. Essentially, they should be matching to the Torguard configuration file that you uploaded where it's got that public IP address. So both of those should match. And if they're matching, that means they're using the correct configurations. So to recap, essentially we spun up our QBittorrent client in a Docker container. We did the same for VPN. Now we used Torguard, but with the WireGuard piece of software. And essentially we routed the traffic through there to make sure that we're nice and safe. Clear as mud. I know that was probably a bit hard to follow along, but it was deeply technical and involved, and I just wanted to make a quick video on it before I forgot everything that I did, and hopefully it can help remind me about it in the future. That's all I had for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.